So Alex and I have written Python in a Nutshell 4th edition, which you can see here. Short history of the book. Alex, you wrote the first one back in 2003. Want to talk about how you got involved with that?
Yep, I was very active on the Usenet group about Python. Was unofficially acknowledged as one of the most helpful participant there, answering people's questions. Even though I was a newbie in Python 20 years ago, I still could grasp so many things about the language. One of the most senior active Python community members, Steve Holden, nicknamed me the Martelli bot. That was a big honor because the other two people in the Python community nicknamed to be bots were Tim Peters, the Tim bot, and Frederick Lund, the F bot. And so I joined as the third bot in this sense, and I noticed that one thing that was missing in the to the Python community was a nutshell book. So many of the things I was answering would be answered in a proper nutshell book. So I wrote a proposal for O'Reilly. They were very interested in Python. Indeed, they've been funding an award for contribution to the Python community ever since. But there was a little delay because their urgency was a Python cookbook, and they didn't have any other for that. So I was volunteered for the task. So my first book was actually the Python cookbook. But right after that was gone, I was able to dive into the nutshell and tried to keep it concise. Managed to get to 600 pages at the time, but
not too bad, especially for you. You had a very good editor at the time, helping you keep concise.
My first editor, Laura Lewin, taught me so much about how to write for O'Reilly, how to write good technical English.
Yeah. So that was through version. Yeah. So that was through version 2.2, and then you and I got together, and I helped with version the second edition, which went through 2.5. And then we didn't update the nutshell until 2017.
There was a little problem that in 2005 I had joined Google and was working full time and a half. So finding time to write a book wasn't exactly my top priority.
Right. So we ended up getting pressured by O'Reilly in 2016, I think it was, to finally go ahead and write the third edition, which ended up being huge because we had to cover both 2.7 and 3.5. We got Steve Holden to help with that.
Python 3 was not yet used in my workday, and so I didn't really have any experience of Python 3. So we were very happy to be able to recruit Steve Holden, who did. The same Steve Holden who had invented and founded the Python Software Foundation and the PyCon conferences and a lot of great contributions.
Yeah. So finally, then during the pandemic, we got talked into doing a fourth edition, which covered just Python 3. And Steve came along for the ride, and also Paul McGuire, who we brought in to help because it was kind of a huge undertaking. we ended up with 4 authors. So Alex and I in Sunnyvale, California. Paul is in Austin, Texas. And Steve is in Britain, somewhere near London, I think Hastings or something like that. So we had to collaborate across time zones and across continents. And we ended up using a lot of Google Spreadsheets. Paul created most of them and kept them updated. We did a lot of Google Meets weekly. And we actually wrote the nutshell in Google Docs. I keep mentioning Google. Alex works there, so he's a very big Google fanboy. But we were able, using all of this, to actually meet all of our deadlines. And the editor was rather pleased and surprised. Right,
Apparently, in your career at O'Reilly, this was the very first time that any author, even a single one, had met all deadlines.
Some deadlines we actually beat and submitted stuff a week ahead of time. So we did have to work through some style issues to make sure that the book actually was a coherent single book with one voice rather than 4 books by different authors kind of jammed together. And luckily we all agreed on Oxford commas and all agreed on active voice. Passive should be avoided. And we had to agree on the typography. I can't tell you how long we argued about whether commas in code snippets should be in code font or in the regular font, because while visually it looks better to have it in the regular font because of spacing, but it's like, oh my God. And we had to figure out how to indicate version numbers. But we ended up getting it worked out. We had several reviewers, and our copy editor was freaking amazing. Rachel Head was our copy editor, and unlike copy editors we've worked with before, she actually was very familiar with the whole technical issues side as well as the English language side, and actually found a couple of technical issues that 4 authors and 3 reviewers had not caught. So she was amazing. Yeah. Along the way, in order to try and slim down the book a little bit, we decided that there were a couple of things we were not going to actually cover in the book. Alex, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, the big one is async.io. And all the ecosystem going around with async. It's absolutely crucial. News is very IO bound and therefore has incredible benefits from async. But the subject is huge because programming for async is essentially a task of the same magnitude as programming in the first place. There are already some good entire books about async in Python, and we decided we couldn't have a 2,000 pages book to really cover it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we really snipped it, and that was the hardest decision of all. Exactly because we snipped it not because it doesn't matter, but because it matters too much, and it really really deserves its own books. And the other big deal is Python is hardly ever used on its own. The vast majority of Python code will be working with third-party frameworks. There are so many. Django and Flask for web, Panda for data handling, Python, TensorFlow, and the Keras API above it, GUIs, and so on. Again, this could, trying to do justice to even a subset of them could easily double the size of the book. So regretfully, we had to reduce the thing to essentially pointers to other existing documentation about them. Fortunately, compared with my first experiences in the first edition 20 years ago, the quality of online books you can find nowadays is several notches better. So don't feel too guilty for sending readers to the framework specific documentation online or in books.
Yeah. Another thing we decided was that there's a couple of areas where it's really a moving target, like packaging. We put that online so that we can occasionally update it. We put pointers to the Python Packaging Authority because they're the ones who do all the documentation. But so we put that online. It's part of the book. It's available online on our GitHub, but it's not in the physical book. Same with extending and embedding.
Yeah, the physical book
that
has
online.
one page summary of the subject with
Right.
a pointer to the online one. There's
Right.
an advantage to that. I mean, you don't have to buy the book to read those chapters. So
right.
Go ahead and use your browser to that URL and have fun.
All right. Okay. Speaking of GitHub, we do have a repo for all the sample code from the book. And Paul got really excited about all of the language changes and all of the PEPs. And so he put together a couple of web pages where you can do a search for things by keywords to find the PEP abstract that tells you about, for example, ZoneInfo. You can also see when ZoneInfo was brought into Python. So if you type that in, it'll tell you it came in Python 3.9. So
by the way,
we're gonna, yeah.
We don't mention pythonanywhere.com anywhere in the book, but as you can see, Paul McGuire in particular is a fanatic for it. He essentially puts all of his freely available Python stuff online at pythonanywhere.com. And just so you know, it's not in the book, but I think we tried at least half a dozen different suppliers of online Python, and Python Anywhere is the one that we, mostly Paul, chose in the end. So if you ever need that service, consider that.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about a couple of things that we learned or discovered in the writing the book that we thought was fun and worth sharing. So my favorite new thing, I'm a time zone girl, is the ZoneInfo module, which came in 3.9, and it's a concrete implementation of time zones that you use with TZInfo, and it uses the system time zone data. If that doesn't work, it uses TZ data. Now on my machine, I'm using Windows, so I had to pip install TZ data. But once it's installed, you don't need to import it. It just works in the background. And ZoneInfo is nifty because you can like get a list of the available time zones, so you know exactly how to spell the particular one you want to use. And it has one class called ZoneInfo. And I recommend that from ZoneInfo, you import ZoneInfo so that you can use that one class. And I just want to show a little snippet of how to use it. So say you've got a date time of May the 4th, Star Wars Day, at 6:30, and you realize that you created that date time You created it in Eastern time in the US. And well, I'm actually in Sunnyvale, which is on the West Coast. Whoops. So I can replace that time zone from New York to the Pacific time zone of Los Angeles using the ZoneInfo and using .replace. And as you see, it replaces the time zone, but not any of the time info or any of the date info. So it's still May the 4th at 6:30. But say I have a friend who lives in Kathmandu and I want to invite them to a meeting, but I want to know, okay, well, what time is that in Kathmandu? If I want to convert the time, the date time to Kathmandu time from Pacific time, I use as time zone. And again, I can use ZoneInfo, and you can see that the new ZoneInfo has the updated date, which should be 5/5, not 5. Yeah, May 5 at 7:15 a.m. because it's 12 hours and 45 minutes ahead of PST. It's 5 hours and 45 minutes offset from UTC, which is a really weird time zone, if you ask me. But ZoneInfo just takes care of that for you. And I think it's really nice because you don't have to roll your own anymore. It just works really nicely. I just wanted to point out that replace is not a new thing, but it's something that I really discovered more deeply when I was working on this time chapter, and realized that replace just changes the particular attribute without changing anything else, whereas as time zone will update all of the time and date information to the new time zone. Also, the keyword argument you use, for one is you use TZInfo, and for the other you have to use TZ. And why they made those decisions, I don't know. But I just want to point out that you need to be careful to use the correct one. All right, Alex, you're up.
So, I think I probably spent most time in this edition. It's not really new. It's been around since Python 3.0. And I've had to struggle with it a lot over the last few years. So I wanted to put down all the stuff I wish somebody had put down for me 5 years ago when I started wrestling with it. There's two things about Unicode in Python 3. Text strings default to Unicode, which I think is an unalloyed good, because it does allow you to represent just about every human language nowadays, plus a few non-human ones. Klingon, for example, is covered, as well as emoticons and so on. Not so obviously good is that identifiers also may contain Unicode, and they get normalized with the wrong algorithm. Wrong, okay. So first of all, if you really need to work deeply with Unicode, take 6 months of your life and study all the Unicode documents. You really cannot do it in fewer than 6 months. So the Unicode Technical Note 31 explains clearly how a case-sensitive language should use the NFC algorithm for normalization. Python is case sensitive, but for reasons that I never was able to fathom, has decided to use a different algorithm, NFKC. So now we have a PEP about some of the traps and pitfalls awaiting you when using Unicode identifiers. Personally, I think can I have the previous slide again? I'm not
Sorry.
with it. Thank you.
Sorry.
The simplest way to say, just forbid this misfeature. Do not allow in your code base identifiers that are not ASCII. That may be considered very limited for some people. For Italian, it mostly means if you use Italian identifiers, you cannot use accents in them. Honestly, I've never really felt any constraint about that. Some other languages may be pricklier about it, but the amount of accidents and pitfalls you'll avoid if you can impose this rule on the code in your code base is huge. Next, please.
We will see examples of that coming up. One thing Paul noticed. Go ahead, Alex.
No.
Oh, so one thing Paul noticed when we were working on this is that middle dot, not the regular period, but middle dot is a valid identifier character. And so you can use it in your identifiers, but it could cause some problems with debugging if you don't realize that that's what's going on. Alex, you had some issues on why this might have come up?
So we're all used by now to underscore as a separator when we need to have multiple words as part of the single identifier. But that is considered extremely unnatural by a lot of people who are not programmers. The COBOL programming language, which may be old, but it still has billions of lines of code all over the world, allows the uses of dashes instead of underscores. But just about every language alive today uses the dash as a minus sign. So the use of the middle dot is kind of a compromise, a character that is not used for any other purpose.
Okay. So this is an really actual, this is from the actual book, chapter 3, page 36, and goes back to what Alex was talking about with the normalizable Unicode characters in identifiers and the pitfalls you can run across. So, Alex?
Yeah. It's hard to predict, but many Unicode code points whose glyphs look pretty different are actually normalized by the algorithm Python has chosen to the same underlying character. So for example, superscript A and superscript O normalized to lowercase plain good old A and O. So if you think you're doing different variables, you're wrong. Python thinks you're talking about the same variables in different ways. This is an example. Simply, you thought you're assigning 4 variables. Nope. You're assigning and reassigning the same 2.
Yeah.
This is extremely confusing. Just avoid it. Unless you need to write a ransom note in Python, in which case you may want to take advantage for colorfulness of, you see, all of these ways to spell hello underscore, world underscore, and so on, get normalized. And a big trap there is that identifiers get normalized, keywords do not. If you try to spell except with some of these fancy glyphs, you will get a syntax error.
Right.
But print is not a keyword anymore in Python 3, and so you can have fun with it if this is your notion of fun.
Right. Paul actually created a website where you can go ahead and do this kind of craziness if you actually want to.
And here is where things can get really, really hairy. There are 18 somewhat different glyphs you can use to spell uppercase A. The one you normally think of is code 65, named Latin capital letter A, but it's not enough. You can actually code double struck or fracture capital A. Some of them don't look like A's at all, but they're all normalized there thanks to Python's choice of a normalization algorithm. But beware, there's characters whose glyphs look identical to A in 99.9% of the fonts, which are not A. One example is Greek capital letter alpha. That looks exactly like a Latin capital letter A in just about every font I've ever seen in my life. They do not normalize to each other.
Right.
So you are not renaming two different variables with visually undistinguishable names. That is an accident or a hack waiting to happen.
Oh, yeah.
As PEP 672 will remind you.
Yeah. Another thing that Paul pointed out was L strip and R strip might remove more than you want. So for example, you have this URL and you want to strip off the prefix https:// You think, oh, I'll use lstrip. Well, no. What lstrip actually does is removes each of those characters anywhere it finds in that string, rather than just the prefix.
In the beginning.
If you want to, right, if you want to actually remove the prefix, then in 3.9, remove prefix was added, and now you can remove the specific prefix that you want. There's also remove suffix. So if you want to keep shell but remove the .com, you could use that with remove suffix. And so that's really nice. It is something that you might want to double check in your code base, because I think a lot of us didn't realize that lstrip does that. And you might be having some subtle bugs that you didn't even realize were there. Alex?
Oh, this is an old issue, but Paul found an excellent way to show it. Integers have a broader range of absolute precision than floats. Floats only have 53 bits available to represent the number plus a few more for each exponent. So you can't really count reliably above 2 to the 53 power. Ints can no doubt represent numbers more accurately than your machine's memory can possibly store them, because their maximum is 2 to the power of 2 to the power of 63. That's
Wow.
10 to the power of more than
A lot.
2 billion.
Many Carl Saganses.
You'll run out of memory before you
Uh-huh.
hit those limits, but not with floats. Look at the anomalies. You increment 2 to the 53, you do not see the first increment. You skip for the second, again for the third. That beware of using, this is not a new issue, but it just something more that we run into while debugging some of our scripts.
Another thing we just wanted to mention that did not get mentioned in the book, but we may get it put into the packaging chapter is, or somewhere in errata or something.
It's about building Python from sources.
Right.
Sources.
Yeah. So this is something that might be useful.
It's not trivial because there's so many flags, and it's not obvious what each and every one of them does. This website has essentially embedded in practical ways the knowledge of what flags to use, depending on the Python version and a few other options, the ones that people are normally interested in. It only works for a bash script. But these days, this means essentially any machine you can possibly dream of, because current versions of Windows embody Linux runtime. It's been the userland part has been there for, I think, 3 years now. And for more than a year now, there's also a parallel kernel. So you can just forget that you're using flicking windows and enjoy life as if you were using good old Linux.
Okay. Oh, and this was kind of fun, Alex.
Just a curiosity, but yes. Don't know if I have the time because we have a strict deadline coming soon, but Python sort algorithm is the only algorithm as ever named by name in a United States Supreme Court case. The case was Oracle America versus Google, and the point was not about the actual Python implementation of this incredibly good algorithm, TimSort, but the Java implementation. That Google was accused by Oracle of having copied, and the court decided that many other issues they just decided Oracle was wrong. On this one, they decided Oracle was right, and the penalty against that Google was ordered to pay to Oracle was $0.00, which is an interesting way of saying don't waste our time, which the Supreme Court gets to do. I remember how that Java version was born because I was there when George Block started hacking at it on his laptop during a tech talk in which we were presenting TimSort in Python. Look, George Block was and is a Java guru.
Okay. Speaking of money, a portion of all the royalties from Python in a Nutshell do go to the PSF as a donation. And we do have a discount code that's good worldwide for 40% off. It's good through May 31st. It's only available on Google Play books, but you might be able to use that to get an online copy of the book. And
O'Reilly wasn't able to negotiate with Amazon for as good a discount as this,
right,
nor for a worldwide discount, while
right.
Google Play had no problem granting both. So
Yeah.
that's how the Google
Yeah.
Play version is getting to be kind of hard to put on your Kindle if that's what you use for reading
Yeah.
ebooks.
But if you're reading on a laptop or on a tablet, you're just fine. We're going to leave this slide up for a couple minutes so people can grab the discount code if they want. And now it's time for a few minutes of Q&A. We have about 10 minutes left for that. And if I click on View tab, are you still able to see the shared? No. Oh, okay. Okay. I just want to be able to see you guys. Okay. So questions?
Okay. How does ZoneInfo deals with the daylight saving time? Is it managed at all?
Sorry?
How does ZoneInfo deals with the daylight saving time? Is it managed at all?
Daylight savings time is managed using, it uses the Olson database. So if you use the right zone info, it'll just update as it should. So
The big point here is that legislatures throughout the world keep tweaking the details of when exactly such things as daylight saving times apply. TZ data is a Linux component which gets continuously updated for that. On the Windows side, if you use the Windows side of things, you're responsible for remembering to refresh it, because it's possible that the legislature of Rwanda has decided to slightly tweak the thing so there's a week extra or a week less. You can't really follow that kind of thing on your own. If you want to cover all the world, keep updating TZ data. And the TZ data volunteer authors are the one who take on this huge chore. Can't believe it, but it's 144 different rules for 144 different countries.
Yeah, so as far as daylight savings time and stuff, you just need to make sure that you are using an aware date time, not a naive date time, and you should be fine. And that's covered in the book. How to switch something from naive to aware. Other questions?
Yes.
I'm getting a lot of echo right now. I'm not sure why.
Maybe the microphone. I will tell.
Okay.
I will read it to you, and then I will tell again for the people. Why
Okay.
don't we sanitize the Python source code against madness as UTF-8? Is it necessary for Python code to be UTF-8? This is the question.
The answer is no, but UTF-8 will let you represent any Unicode character in a reasonably concise way. I've heard a few Asian colleagues complain that certain Asian alphabets get expanded a little bit too much, maybe, but the alternative is chaos. Before Unicode and UTF-8, the way you encoded the same character in the traditional Chinese and simplified Chinese and Japanese, even though it looks like exactly the same ideogram, was encoded in completely different ways. UTF-8 standardizes things once and for all. I would strongly recommend using it. It's hard to imagine that you would ever have any reason to regret that. Incidentally, the main inventors of UTF-8, Ken Thompson, also known as for inventing Unix, and Rob Pike, are also at Google now. Well, Rob isn't anymore, but Ken is still. So anyway, just a curiosity.
You're such a fanboy.
18 years with a company will do that to you.
Okay, that's fair. Other questions?
Yeah, we have a humorous question. I think they saw a cat in the video, and they asked him the name. I'm so sorry.
Oh. This is Liza, named after Liza Minnelli for her beautiful eyes. Good question. The important things in life.
That this character substitution will be removed in future version of Python.
Sorry?
The substitution of characters, of Unicode characters.
Something about substitution of Unicode characters. We're having trouble.
Understanding what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah.
In the future.
Okay.
Okay. Will be remove the normalization of UTF-8 characters.
Oh,
Definitely it cannot happen in Python 3. It cannot happen in Python 3 because that would break backwards compatibility. There would be scripts running currently in Python 3.11 that would break in, I don't know, Python 3.99 or whatever. Maybe at some point in the future, there will be a Python 4, which is allowed to break backwards compatibility. In that case, I hope we can form a posse and lobby whoever is in charge. Remember, Guido is not the dictator anymore. He stepped down, and now we have a steering committee. Maybe we can lobby the steering committee to undo this wrong, to my impression, wrong decision that was so early on in Python 3. Point is, at the time, none of us in the Python core committer group had spent the needed 6 to 9 months full time in the Unicode documentation, so we weren't quite aware. And I think Note UX 13.1 didn't exist yet, so we would have had to figure it out on our own.
Alex, would it be possible to switch the algorithm that's being used for normalization without just changing everything? Would that break backwards compatibility?
It would break backwards compatibility because some scripts that run now would stop running.
Okay.
Now, the scripts that run now are silly ones, like the ransom note, but still, the guarantee of backwards compatibility for Python isn't if you write sensibly. We don't have that sanity clause there.
Yeah. Okay. And it is 10:30, so I think we are going to say goodbye. Buonanotte e grazie a tutti.
Ciao.
Ciao a tutti.